telling you what, it gives me goosebumps, freaking goosebumps. Oh my God, first concert since before COVID. I took Gloria to see Kiss. Thank God, 18-year-old kid got to see Kiss before they're done. And last night, I'll tell you what, it's inspiration and the sound, the music. I like Korn. I would never say I was the big, huge Korn fan, but I like Korn music. And I knew there was 2 songs that I didn't know. Everything else I knew. And when they went live, oh my God, when that curtain dropped, oh my God, it was absolutely amazing. Hey, let me know if anybody can hear me, because this says I'm live, shows I'm live. Last comment I see is Thomas. So somebody type in there, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? I see some people typing in there, and I see 2 concurrent users. It's got to be more. I updated the software, just so you know, too. We had a problem March 1st, so I spent some. Good, Brian, audio is perfect, great. Can you see me too? Good. Nice. I just spent the money on this program I've been using for 5 or 6 years. I did an update, and I was hesitant to go to a new program or use the same one. Awesome. So I did an update on it, and I was worried. I tried to go live a little bit ago, and it says error, and I'm like, what the hell? So I shut everything down, restarted it. Good, so we're back. So the email I sent out this morning, I did that after I was on like copy number 2. Back in the Coffee with Kenny days, that's by copy 2, I have the inspiration for the video. By copy 3, I'm going live, shooting Coffee with Kenny. And today I'm just sitting back after that concert last night. I just couldn't help but write the email I wrote this morning. If you're new to us, you don't know who we are. I'm Kenny with Helicopter Online Ground School. Been online 10 years. We're in our 2-week celebration right now. And last night I took a night off to go see Korn with my daughter. And it was absolutely, the live show was unbelievable. Unbelievable. So it made me go back and think about when I first started with helicopters. And 25 years ago, my sister wanted me to go to the Indianapolis 500. And I didn't want to go because, partying on Saturday nights was more important to me. And I know it sounds bad, but this is the truth. And she goes every year, and everybody backed out on her that year. And she wanted me to go. And she nagged and nagged. Well, I had to, like I couldn't go out and party, normally Saturday night like I normally would, right? And I was going to take away from my Sunday, sleeping in after hanging out all night and seeing a live band somewhere. So we go, and I'm kind of I'm being a pain in the ass on the way down, and I'm listening to the radio. It's a couple-hour trip down to Indy, and as we're driving down there, I'm listening to the radio, and she's listening to all the stuff, and I'm starting to kind of go, well, maybe this will be all right. And we get there, and at the time I'm in the towing service. I have law enforcement experience, fire department experience, and I started a heavy-duty towing service on my days off. Yeah. So anyway, I'm living life, doing the thing, but I had this helicopter dream that I hadn't really, got started on yet. I didn't have a plan to make it happen. I didn't think I was smart enough, didn't think I could afford it. I went through counseling after the death of my mom from Lou Gehrig's disease in my early 20s because of my problems with depression, losing my mom at such a young age. And so I got inspired to do a lot of things through self-help videos and going to counseling, and it helped me a lot. So anyway, we get to the Indy 500 that day, and I'm still being kind of a pain in the ass, but they had rained that morning, so there's tow trucks going around the track, drying the track, and I'm like, okay, and I'm eyeballing these new wreckers going up and down, because I was into that kind of thing, right? I had a towing business at the time. And helicopters are hovering above, and they're flying people in and out, and that gets me kind of excited. And I'd never been to the Indy 500. So then the cars come out, start warming up the track, and they're going around and around. Now I'm starting to get excited. And I think we were in turn 3. And when that, the go flag comes out, and those cars come by at full speed, it was the first time in my life that I realized what the term breathtaking meant. I literally couldn't freaking breathe. I was so blown away at the sound and the speed and the helicopters. It was unbelievable. So I enjoy the race. I'm watching the helicopters. And as my email this morning, every prior event to that, I always thought alcohol had to be involved, right? Well, that day, I didn't drink a drop. And then pretty soon as I'm enjoying the day, I'm like, thinking, wow, this is pretty awesome. And I'm watching people getting up every 20 minutes to go get another beer. And then they're getting up and going to the bathroom. And I'm thinking, you're missing the beauty of this race, wasting your day drinking and running to the bathroom all the time. And I come home that day going, you know what? I haven't drank at I still drink. I'm not preaching saying don't drink, people. That's not what I'm saying. I still enjoy a beer. I still like to go out and watch live bands and have a good time locally. But like a big event like yesterday, no. I take 3 people with me, no drinking. But this day inspired me, right? So anyway, there's that damn heater. I'm going to go turn that thing down. I'm going to come right back. This thing annoys the hell out of me. So anyway, I came back inspired, like I want something more out of my life, right? And shortly thereafter, I took a intro lesson to helicopters, and I just got started and never looked back. And, once I got started flying and realized how much time and effort it takes and how you got to get up and feel good in the morning and feel rested, I kind of had to, distance myself from the crew of people I'd been hanging out with, right? Because what we were doing, going out and boozing it up, this wasn't in the plan anymore. I couldn't hang around and live that lifestyle anymore. And so the Indianapolis 500 changed my life in more ways than one, made me realize I wanted to go for something different. And so last night at Corn, here's the guy coming through, right? First, the guy sitting next to me, he's already drinking before he even gets in the place. And then his buddy's coming through, and he's, 2 beers, and he's struggling through there, and you're going, oh, God, right? And he's like, hey, sorry, I drink a lot, so I'll be going through here a lot to go get beer. And I thought, yeah, I used to do that 25 years ago. And the entertainment's a whole lot more fun. Like I said, I'm not preaching saying don't drink, but it just freaking inspired me, and that set this whole thing in motion, and 25 years later, we're here with HOGS. That day, Indianapolis 500 changed my life. And last night, 25 years later, just being at that Korn concert and watching the stage presence. I mean, you had you got the lead man out there, and he made the show, right? Because he was talking to the people. And sometimes you see a band and they don't talk much, and a band can talk too much, but he talked to you just enough, and had the crowd eating out of his hand. And when people are screaming, they're going crazy, and he's talking to them, he stops in the middle of a song, and then he says, he gets them going, and goes, okay, shut the fuck up. And the whole crowd of people just nothing. And then goes back to the song. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'm still inspired today. I just can't even believe how freaking cool that was. So go home, get a good night's sleep, get up this morning, drink coffee, and I'm like, you know what? Live Training Tuesday, let's do it. It's been brought up in a conversation the last 24 hours with the HOGS team, and with bringing a new CFI on board. Hey, Nick, there he is in chat. I'm impressed. This is I'm going to call him a young man because he's younger than me, getting ready to travel here 1,800 miles from Arizona, I believe, to be the new HOGS CFI. So he's here in chat. Good call, my friend. Very good call. Because you already said, you got to impress me when you get here, man. So anyway, where's my train of thought? Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. And we were kicking around the live training idea, and yesterday came up with Daniel and Nick, and they're like, hey, can we do this? And Nick's got a whole bunch of ideas. I'm like, hey, we've done this before. We know how to do it. We called it Live Training Tuesday. Well, I'm drinking coffee this morning. It's 2022. It's Tuesday. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. I got plenty of time to get ready for a thing at 2. So let's do it. Let's bring back Live Training Tuesday at 2. And when we did it before, I had multiple camera angles, and we brought guests in like Hauser, whoever, and multiple mics, and built presentations. Well, it turned, we're all week getting ready, and then kind of cleaning up after our live events, right? And it just took so much time. And then we moved to this hangar 3 years ago, and Live Training Tuesday fell to the wayside. So yesterday, the new CFI is like, well, hey, I'm going to do this and do that, and should I do this, and how long should it be? And I'm like, hey, hang on. You know what? Let's not make it too complicated. Let's do the same thing called Live Training Tuesday. We come back at 2 and we talk to the members. Today's open to the public. We're going to do these every Tuesday, but we're probably going to limit these, make them unlisted. They'll probably be on our site for members, but I thought I'd invite the public today so you can see what we're doing. And if you want to be involved in Live Training Tuesday every week, get questions answered, cover topics that need to be covered, that's what we're going to do, Live Training Tuesday at 2. I'm kicking them off the first couple. We'll get Nick, the new CFI, in doing a few of them. Brian Rutledge, let him jump in now and then do some, and we'll see how it goes. But we're going to go live every Tuesday at 2 to take care of you, our members, and work one-on-one and answer your questions and do all kinds of stuff. So I am live, but I see Brian and Nick and Heather all in chat, so they're going to take care of questions for me because I'm on a roll. So let's do some training. I'm super inspired, and I want to share. So I thought, you know what? Let's go back to top 10 check ride tips, because that's ultimately what everybody's worried about anyway, right? So most of you already have a copy of this. You can go below. You can get a paperback copy. Heather will ship it to you in the U.S. Sorry, we're not shipping out of the U.S. anymore. Heather will ship it to you, and there's a free PDF down below. But the important point is, Dan Taz Chrisman, you can see him right there with me. He's down at Heli Expo representing HOGS this week, okay? And the reason I didn't go to Heli Expo is because I had already planned this with my daughter in December. We bought the tickets for Corn, and then Heli Expo came up, and then I'm like, well, I could try to go to like the last day of the show, and my daughter's like, Dad, well then just sell the tickets then. And then I got what she said, right? The Corn was the important event. I didn't want to be going to the show and like, oh hell, I got to get home and get the bag. I got to get in the plane tomorrow, try to make it to Dallas, and then try to get some sleep and get there on the last day of the show. I went, you know what, screw it. It's about my daughter. It's more about family time than at Heli Expo. I can go next year. Dan Taz Chrisman is there. He is at the show in Dallas. So if you want to reach out to HOGS, look for Dan on the show floor, find him on social media. He's down there. He sent me a picture already. He's with Gabriel Hernandez, one of our success stories, and talking about alcohol. Gabriel Hernandez was live with us on a Live Training Tuesday, and he told us about his problems with alcohol in the past and his arrests and all he had to go through to become a helicopter pilot. He had to overcome a lot of obstacles, and now he's out. He's a double light. He's working in the world, and he's down there today. And I had a picture of Taz and Gabriel together. That's HOGS. You know what? That's HOGS. So Dan and I put this together, top 10 check ride tips. So we'll go over this. We'll see if you got any questions. But let's just go through them. Start 3 weeks in advance, okay? And start 3 weeks in advance, I'm talking for the check ride day. You could actually do this 3 months in advance. The problem is people wait until the night before. Oh, hell, I don't have a sectional. Oh, I need a new far aim. Or whatever the case may be. There's a long list of why people screw up a check ride. And it isn't the hard stuff that screws up check rides, people. It is the easy stuff. You didn't sign the right form. We had a guy one time, wasn't me, different instructor. He was doing an instrument helicopter. He took instrument airplane written. Nobody caught it. He didn't catch it. The instructor didn't catch it. They fly an hour away, and the examiner goes, where's the instrument written? Oh, well, my written's right there. He's like, this isn't instrument for helicopter. This is instrument for airplane. Check ride wasted, day wasted, everybody's time wasted, everybody's frustrated. Is that how you want your check ride to go? No. Start 3 weeks in advance going through the PTS that will become the ACS. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Start getting this stuff ahead of time. For 21 years now, I've seen it the night before. People are calling me. I had a kid who was going for a CFI check ride. I trained him, signed him off, but I was flying EMS the day he wanted to go take his check ride. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm at my EMS job. He calls me the night before, dude, I don't have a sectional. And I'm like, how can you not have a sectional? I don't have one. Well, anyway, he cancels his check ride because he doesn't have a sectional. And the examiner called me. Dude, your CFI applicant canceled because he didn't have a sectional. We could have got one at the airport. And I'm like, Don't be like that. Start 3 weeks in advance going through the PTS and finding every single thing you need for that day. Go through the paperwork, sign, make sure 8710, know your password. Oh my God, the list is endless. There's so many little tiny things that'll screw up a check ride. It's unbelievable. I'll keep going here because, I talk too much. Prepare with the practical test standards. Soon to be the ACS. Doesn't matter. Taz has said, don't worry about the ACS. It ain't no different than the way HOGS already teaches. You don't got to do nothing different. Don't worry about it. Okay? And in the book I wrote about, I believe this was for, I'll tell a story anyway. I got the story I want. I'm up in Michigan doing flight testing for the FAA on the Garmin GPS for Enstrom turbine helicopters a while back. And one of the guys in the room was like, hey, what is it you do? And so I told him, I got this little thing called helicopter on ground school, and this was 5-6 years ago. And I said, I teach people online, the subject areas they need to know. And he's like, well, how do you do that? How is it set up? And I said, well, I base it on the PTS. And he's like, oh my God, how I love to hear that. He proceeds to tell me how he's a 40-year examiner and the problem with people showing up for check rides that have never looked at the PTS. He's just one story, right? My examiner I've used for 21 years now, the one that we now have locally available with the other examiner for our check rides. If you come here to fly with us, hint, hint, subliminal message, flight training packages with HOGS 2022 in the H269 helicopter and Robinson R44. Okay, back to the story. So anyway, this, when I met that examiner as a brand new CFI, I'm like, hey, what do you got for me as a new CFI? What's the trick, what's the tips? And he's like, ever heard of the PTS? I'm like, yeah. Make sure your students use it and you use it. Make sure you go through the PTS. Make sure your students have everything they need before the day of the test, because guess what? They show up and they don't have everything that we need, and then it's not a good day. And that was it. That's all he gave me, okay? So coming from examiners, if you're not opening up the stinking PTS, then you're screwing yourself. And we hear all the time, oh, my instructor never showed it to me. Well, shame on the instructor that's not working through the PTS with you, because that's what needs to happen. Point taken. Is the point taken, I should say? Go through the requirements and pilot logbook in detail. I love this. When I was flying EMS, we had a check airman guy who was like, you know what you need to know about being a helicopter pilot in the EMS industry? He said, read the book. Everything you need to know you learned in kindergarten. And when he first said it, I didn't really understand, but I get it now, thinking about that over the years. It's like when we go through your logbooks. If you book a final approach course with us, in the 6 Zooms, I'm going to go through with you. The first day of your 6 Zooms, I'm going to say, before we go live today on Zoom, have your logbook out, have a FAR aim out in front of you. And over Zoom, we're going to go, okay, I'm going to have the FAR aim open, and we're going to go through the requirements, because you're coming here for a final approach course to finish your rating in 5 days. You make damn sure we're going to be on that first day going through the requirements, because requirements is what screws people up. I have an example from an examiner who did some training with an applicant. I go over the logbooks, and guess what? The 2-hour flight for cross country was 1.8. And so I'm like, the dude I'm flying with, I'm like, hey, this requirement isn't right. Here's why I was flying with an examiner. He signed me off for it. I'm like, well, that examiner probably should open up the FAR aim and see that flight needed to be 2.0, not 1.8. We had to go out and fly a 2.0, and he was pissed. Well, because the guy that flew with him didn't make sure he had the right requirement. So when I say like the kindergartners, that's what I do. When you're here with me doing a rating, it's like, okay, open up your book, kindergartner. Okay. Must have 40 hours in the helicopter. Do you have 40 hours in the helicopter? Must have 10 hours of solo. Do you have 10 hours of the solo? Okay, long cross country, landing at 3 points, 1 leg, so many miles. All right, where is it? What is it? Where'd you go? And then pull out the ruler. All right, how many miles is that leg? How many miles is that leg? How many miles is that leg? How many miles is that total? You got to go through that like you're kindergartner. Every single requirement, you got to go through this stuff and make sure it's right. And that's the beauty of HOGS. That's the beauty of the final approach course. That's the beauty of the 30 days to private pilot. We're going to do this stuff with you on Zoom before you ever land in Indiana. This stuff's not going to happen where you show up and you're not ready. You're going to walk through the door ready to climb in the helicopter and fly because we've already done your log books. We've already went through everything and we know where you're at. And we're going to cover the ground school. Chapter 4. Taz. Taz is down having fun in Heli Expo and I'm here making videos. That's all right. Maintenance logbooks, MEL, kinds of equipment list. These screw everybody up. MEL, MMEL, equipment list. If you ain't 100% on this, you better find out what they are before you go to your check ride. I'm not going through it all right now because I'm telling you, people screw these up. And knowing the maintenance logbooks, and I just clicked at the chapter here real quick before I went live, and a conversation written in this book is about how examiners, everybody likes to tab their logbooks, right? So I want you to think about this one. And there's nothing wrong with tabbing your FAR aim. There's nothing wrong with tabbing your logbooks. But here's the trick. Here's what examiners are talking about, and I got this straight from the horse. Here's what examiners are talking about amongst themselves. Everybody likes to tab their stuff, and they know you've tabbed the 100-hour. They know you've tabbed the last annual. They'll sometimes ask you something that's probably not the last. They're going to ask you something that actually requires you to look through that logbook and find it for yourself. So although tabbing is good, everybody tabs because you want your book to look used and worn and have the nice little tabs, but you better know what's inside the book. You better know how to go find stuff because they're going to stump you if you're bullshitting your way through. They're going to see it and they're going to know it. Just saying. Chapter 5. Let's go to the next one. What do we got? Chapter 5. Cement your knowledge through repetition. This is how we learn. Over and over and over again. Where's my original notebook? I keep laying it out so I can find it when I want it. Anyway, I failed my check ride by private, and that's why I built my notebook, and that's why I studied that thing over and over and over and over and over, and I wrote stuff down, because you learn through watching a video, listening to a video, reading a book, writing things down in your notes. The more times you go over it, the more you're going to learn it. And you can sit there at home and be testing yourself and think you're good, but when the examiner's across the table, all that knowledge you had, it just goes out the window, because all of a sudden you're across the table from the guy and you're going, I'm drawing a blank. I'm drawing a blank. We learn through repetition. We go over it and we go over it and we go over it, and you need to go over it again. Jamie in the Orange R44, who inspired the Final Approach course, said, I went through every HOGS video at least twice, if not 3 times, and that's why he showed up in Indiana and his knowledge was bam, done on the first day, because he watched it over and over and over. No matter how well you think you know it, keep going over it. We learn through repetition. Chapter 6, what we got next? Be an hour early. This is in the top 10 check ride tips from an examiner, who I rolled that video one day this past week, and we'll roll it again soon because we want to replay our March 1st event because we had technical issues that day, and now that I got my system fixed, I want to run again and give you the content that we did that day. I want to talk about some cool maneuver stuff that you may not be taught by your CFI, and then we rolled the 10 tips in the examiner. This is one of them. So 2 different examiners, and then me. Be an hour early. Be an hour and a half early. There's nothing worse than showing up late. Nothing. You want to beat the examiner there. You want to have time to get a drink. You want to have time to go to the bathroom. You want to have time to, get a snack. You want to have time to maybe look up one more thing. Whatever it is, be at that check ride early and be prepared. Spend the time. Be early, man. I'm telling you. It's a very easy thing to do, and all these wonderful check rides we've had over the years. Hauser hates it. I tell the story all the time. Hauser smoked his private pilot check ride. Incredible. Smooth as silk. His commercial check ride, I'll be honest. This is clear back when I owned the helicopter prior to launching HOGS that's taken me down and ruining me financially. I have the pressure of operating this helicopter business. Hauser's thinking about buying into the Enstrom and joining me as a partner to help save me as I'm going down the tubes. And we even went to the bank together and talked to the banker. And then that morning, Hauser was late and he wasn't getting along at home, you know. And he had a horrible check ride. Why? Because we ended up late. And the examiner wasn't happy, I wasn't happy, Chris wasn't happy, and his check ride sucked. And at one point, he was stumbling on basic VFR. Back to my point, people, of the simple stuff. We're sitting there and he's like, Chris was flying airplanes and helicopters at the same time. And you can get confused on the regs and the daytime, nighttime, and the airplane, helicopter, da-da-da. He gets confused on a spot or specific reg in there. And he's struggling. And the examiner says, okay, let's back up. What's basic VFR? He's looking for 3 miles and 1,000 feet, right? And Chris is going, airplane, helicopter, daytime, nighttime. You know, he's going, and he's back and forth, and he's thinking, and the examiner's looking at me like, and I'm back in the corner going, and I'm going, Chris, it's 3 miles and 1,000 feet. That's it. In the turmoil, Chris couldn't come up with 3 miles and 1,000 feet, okay? The examiner goes, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. I'll be back. I know what that is. The examiner won't let me sit in anymore, okay? Back then, I could still sit in. Examiner walks out. I know it's my cue. I get up. He walks out, and I go, Chris, it's 3 miles and 1,000 feet. And he's going, yeah, but. And I'm like, stop it. It's 3 miles and 1,000 feet, Chris. And I'm just frustrated. So I go out in the hallway, and the examiner goes, what is up with your boy? And I'm like, dude, you know he had a smoke in private. Things ain't going well at home. We were late. And he's like, your boy better pull it together because this ain't looking good. And Chris ended up pulling it out of his butt and passing. But that's the difference between being prepared and being on time and showing up late. If that ain't enough of a good enough story to tell you, I don't know what it is. And while I'm looking, I see the chat going like crazy, but I know Heather's here, Nick's in there, Brian's here, so hopefully they're taking care of your questions. Lay out all your documents nice and neat. And Taz actually took this picture, and we added this to the book. So I preach it, Taz supplied the picture. And it's the laptop, the 8710, the ID, the licenses, pens, pencils, E6B, helicopter flying handbook. It's beautiful. It's all nice and neat. You know what? Some people go, oh, who cares? What's it matter? You want to be early that day. You want to present yourself well. You want to have everything laid out in a nice and neat fashion because every check ride starts out the same way. Hey, let's go ahead and take a look at your paperwork first. It's 8710. It's your ID. You know, written test. How'd that do? Okay, you got your cross-country planning. If it's all laid out nice and neat, you're early, you're there, you're ready to go, and you start showing the examiner stuff, you're on your way. You are on your way. If you were late, not good. If you don't have a document, not good. You don't have a sectional, not good. You don't have an E6B, not good. Okay? Get there early. Have everything ready. Have it all laid out nice and neat. Take a big, deep breath. When the guy walks in the door, you are ready to go. And I'm telling you, people, these are very easy hints, and this is what screws up check rides. 21 years of doing this. I've seen it happen over and over again. Now, there's a good one. This might be contradictory. Chapter 8. Know that the check ride is hype. I say that because it's like going to the law enforcement academy. I'm going to compare it to that. And I'm making up all this stuff on the fly. I'm not making it up, I'm just telling stories that come to mind. When I went to the police academy in 1990. And at that time, Indiana was number 4 in the nation for law enforcement academies. And everybody, you know, oh, dude, 3 more weeks to go to the academy. Oh, they're going to kick your ass. And everybody hypes it up, hypes it up, hypes it up. And you know what? It was tough and it was difficult. And it was the most difficult things I ever did in my life. However, it wasn't as bad as what everybody made it out to be. I got there, I kept my nose clean, stayed out of sight, out of mind, didn't cause trouble, made sure my gig line was straight, no threads on the uniform, went back to the hotel, went back to the academy room at night, studied. When the other guys were out at the strip bar, I was back studying, Hell, the check ride is the same thing. If you show up prepared and you've studied and you've applied yourself and you look good and you feel good and you've completed everything and you go in with confidence, the check ride is going to go well. If you're lacking in any of those areas, sure, there can be a problem. And then even with all the proper planning, anybody can screw up a maneuver and have a bad day. But Taz agreed with me on this one. Know that the check ride is hype. It's way more worse when people are talking to you about it, and it's way more worse in your head. It's way worse than what it really turns out to be. Unless you get a nightmare for an examiner. We had that one time. Oh my God. That went back on the examiner. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that story. Examiners in general do really fair jobs from what I've seen in the years. I think examiners are 99% fair, or 90%, 95%. Once in a while you might get a bad examiner, but it doesn't happen very often. Check ride is hype. The check ride is hype. It's a big deal, but don't make it like so much of a big deal that you can't pass it. Oh, I love this one. Answer like you're in court. This is easy for people that have been in law enforcement, or if you've been to court and an attorney has prepped you. But in law enforcement, we learned when you're in court, you don't say anything more than yes or no. And if they ask you a question, you answer with the briefest, shortest answer possible. I've been in the courtroom as a law enforcement officer, and the attorneys will eat you alive. And they will eat you alive, and they'll dissect everything that comes out of your mouth. I brought that with me from law enforcement, and I used it in helicopter training. And Dr. Nick, one of my closest friends of all time, still to this day, one of my first helicopter students, the guy that owned the Enstrom that used to be here, that graciously let me use it every year before he sold it. Dr. Nick is the guy that we did 100 hours of ground school probably, because Nick just, he works super hard. He's a doctor. When he gets a couple days off, he wanted to come to the airport. That was his relaxation. And he wanted me to hand feed him everything. So that was, and which was fine, right? That's what he wanted. That was his relaxation, to come to the airport, fly to ground, fly to ground, fly to ground, fly to ground. Nick is the best example of this ever being used. Here was Nick in his private pilot check ride. Examiner would say something like, what are the 3 types of rotor system? Here's what Nick would do. He'd go, there's semi-rigid, rigid, and what's the third one? I can't think right now. What is it? Semi-rigid, rigid, fully articulated. Anyway, he didn't do that. He just went and fully articulated. And the examiner would go, okay, good. Nick's entire oral check ride, that's exactly how it went. I'll test somebody, like we'll do a Zoom, and I'll go, hey, what's the 3 types of rotor systems? Oh, it's semi-rigid, rigid, and fully articulated, and the semi-rigid does this, and the rigid does that, and don't do that. People burn themselves on check rides, and no matter how many times I tell you that, I get in the check ride and I watch it happen. I watch a person dig themselves into a great big hole, and down they go. And what an examiner's going to do to you is the same thing I'm going to do to you in Zoom. If you start going down that route, I'm going to go, okay, so semi-rigid, tell me about what's that term for that weird rotor system? What's it do? What's that term? And I'm going to take you in a direction you don't want to go, and the examiner's going to do the same thing. Chapter 10. I failed my first helicopter check ride. Why? Because I was so freaked out. I was so stinking nervous. I didn't have the confidence in myself. My instructor, I was his first student. He was fresh out of school. I don't blame him. We're still good friends to this day. I was in his wedding even, you know? I failed because of my confidence. I failed because I was freaked out. I failed because I couldn't control my emotions. I'm already there, and I'm in the check ride day, and I couldn't sleep the night before. I stayed at my instructor's house. They were all young guys that were pilots and doing other things, and they ran this great big house, and I slept on the couch. Couldn't sleep. I don't think I slept a wink. Check ride gets going, and I'm struggling. And prior to the check ride, every time we talked about aircraft logbooks, my instructor would say, "Oh, well, let me see if the maintenance guys are over there." Nope. They're locked up. We can't get them. We'll check another day. Okay. That happened several times. Day of the check ride. Who forgot? Who didn't think about it? Guess we didn't use the PTS. I never saw the aircraft logbooks. So I took my check ride with an FAA examiner, and we knew going in that 1 and 2 don't pass. So I knew that too, right? The pressure's on because an FAA guy. I'm not paying him. And I was like everybody else. I was broke, scrounging every penny for every flight hour. So I chose to take it with the FAA. So I'm already nervous and freaked out at the beginning of the test. And he says, "Okay, well, let's see. Let's just go ahead. This is the beginning of the test. Let's go ahead and take a look at the aircraft logbooks." And I panic. And I'm like, well, they're over in the maintenance area. Well, why aren't they in here? Well, I don't know. He grabs the instructor. They go get the aircraft logbooks. He brings it and sets it down. And he show me the last 100-hour inspection. Kenny Keller opens up the aircraft logbooks. I ain't never seen them. And I'm flipping page to page to page trying to find the 100-hour inspection. And what do you think the guy from the FAA is doing? Writing on the desk, huffing and puffing. So finally I go, "Okay, I gotta be honest, I've never seen these books before." And he's like, "You've never opened those aircraft logbooks?" I said, "I've never seen them before, ever." He's like, "Find the last 100-hour. Can you imagine how that felt? Could you imagine how that felt? I want to ask you one more time. Can you imagine how that felt? I'd never seen the aircraft logbooks. So guess what? How do you think the check ride went from there? I'm nervous. I'm frustrated. I don't have the confidence. I didn't sleep. And now the guy's huffing and puffing, and it sucks. It sucks. He goes, "Well, go ahead and find it." So I scrounge around. I find it. And then he starts answering me questions. And I just, at a certain point, he's like, "Let's take a break. Let's stop the test." "Okay, let's go outside for a minute." "Okay." So we went outside, and it was a beautiful sunny day. It was summertime, and we go outside, and we talked a little bit. The guy was giving me a chance. He was giving me a chance to calm the hell down. He was giving me a chance. He wanted me to pass. And we go back and sit down. He goes, "Okay, we had a little break." He goes, "You've been struggling this morning. So do you feel better?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." "Yeah, right. Like I really feel any better." He was giving me the opportunity to calm down. And then we dig into aerodynamics. And he's saying, "Okay, you're out here in a hover and the engine quits, which way is the nose going to go?" And I struggle with my answer. It takes me too long. And then, we're talking about cellular power and my answer's coming out, but I'm puking it out and it isn't coming smooth. And I didn't state exactly how he wanted to hear it. And at a certain point, he goes, "Okay, I'm going to have to stop the test. You're clearly struggling." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." And he's like, I'm the FAA examiner down here, and I'm also, I work for the FAA, and if you're down here in this area and you get involved in a helicopter accident, I'm going to be the guy that's going to come out." and investigate. You know, and I'm like, he said, so I don't want to come to your helicopter accident. And if you can't answer short and sweet and to the point my questions across the table, how are you going to be able to think through that in the aircraft in an emergency when you're nervous? And he said, when I ask you about selling with power, what are the three things combined together? I want to hear 30, 20, 10. Ready to descent 300 feet per minute or greater, using 20 to 100% of power, airspeed less than 10. At that time, it was less than 10. Now we say less than ETL. But back then, it was still 30, 20, 10. He goes, I need that to be sharp, concise, and to the point. And if I ask you which way the nose is going to go when the throttle gets rolled off or the engine quits, you need to answer which way the nose is going to go. So I failed. And, you know, I didn't go, and this is a true story, I didn't go back for 6 months. And I was still a cop at the time, and I'm driving around. I'm training a new officer, actually. And he was one of my friends, and he knew what I was doing. He's like, hey, did you ever get back to that helicopter thing since you failed? It had been 6 months. And I'm like, no. And he's like, man, you need to go back and finish that. You got a lot of time and energy and all that. And I'm like, I know. And he inspired me that night, driving around. We were working nights, and I was training. We were getting ready to turn him loose on the road. And he goes, man, you got to get back to that. So I went and bought my notebook. And I don't see it, but it looks a lot like this. Big black cover, big spiral bound. This is the private subliminal message, private pilot study guide, put together by Brian Rutledge, link down below. It looks a lot like this. My notebook looks like this. This is a lot nicer. If I go grab mine, it's falling apart. But that's inspired me to take the notebook. I went down to the drugstore, and I literally bought it. And it still has the CVS sticker, Walgreens sticker on the corner. And I went home, and I opened up, and I took all these notes I had, and I just started writing down, retreating blade stall, you know, all the maneuvers, everything that I had that I could think of that I had trouble remembering. Humidity. I had a hell of a time understanding humidity and saturation and dry air and moist air, and anything that I even remotely had trouble with, I wrote in my notebook. And I organized it all in a cool fashion so that it would just be for me. That notebook was never intended for anybody but me. Subliminal message, private pilot study guide down below, 400 test questions. So anyway, that was created in my notebook, and I studied my ass off. And when I went back, it was with a different examiner, and actually it was Jerry Ventrella, who I love talking about. I didn't go back to the FAA guy. I went to Jerry Ventrella, who was a designated pilot examiner, and you know, Jerry's been giving check rides since Vietnam, right? He was a Vietnam era pilot. At that time, he'd given 3,500 check rides or something. And Jerry's known for his half-day orals. And I think we're probably 2 hours in, and he stops and he goes, let's take a break for a second. And he goes, you came in here today with a pink slip. And I said, yep. He goes, what happened? And I said, well, I took my check ride down to Indianapolis, and you know, it didn't go well, and I fumbled around, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, I don't know what happened then, but, you know, we're halfway through, and you're batting 100%. And he's like, what's the change? And I said, because I didn't know my stuff then like I know my stuff now. And he said, well, that's apparent. And we continued on with the check ride, aced the oral, and then screwed up on the flight, almost failed again. Another story for another day. After the fact, we go over to the local pub, and, you know, he's like, by the end of the evening, he's like, hey, buddy, putting his arm over, I about failed you on that cross country. If you wouldn't have got that fixed, I would have failed you. But he's like, but I saw you screw up, and I saw you make a mistake, and now I know that you can think through a problem. So, moral of the story, he said, when we were done, he goes, Kenny, here's what I'm going to do. As examiners, we're a small world, and we all talk amongst each other. And I didn't know that at the time, but of course I know years later that's the case, right? And he said, I'm going to reach out to this guy with the FAA, this other examiner, and I'm going to let him know that even though you didn't go back to see him, that you came in to see me today, and I'm going to let him know how well you did, just so he knows. And I'm like, thank you. You know what? I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And that made me feel like $1 million, right? And then when I showed up at my first job, where I got hired full-time on a salary, and I show up in a city that nobody knows me, and they didn't even really like me because I was an outsider, and I had Robinson time, and none of them flew Robinsons, and they all hated Robinson, so I was the outsider. I had Robinson time under my belt, I had the Robinson factory safety course under my belt, and other instructors did not like me. They didn't like me one bit. And the old timer who I was replacing, another Vietnam era pilot, took me out to fly with me for a day because I was going to replace him. And he said, you know what, Kenny? Someone has trained you well. And he said, whatever you do, don't change a thing about what you do. And I'm going to say what he said. His term was, every redneck around here is going to tell you how you're doing it wrong. But let me tell you, you're doing it right. And don't ever change. And don't ever change what you do. And I have never changed since. So I've learned from some super people in the industry. I've learned from guys that are freaking legends. And that's all I've done is taken what I've learned and, you know, kind of used it for my own purposes. So there you go. There's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Proof that you can do it. Anybody can do it. You got to put your mind to it, and it takes a lot of time and effort and studying. You know, we've been piping out flight training packages. I sent out an email today or the other day. We've got a discovery 1 day, a 3-day, a 5-day final approach course, and a 30 days private pilot course. I just did a Zoom with a young man right before we went live today. I had 25 minutes left. I had to get ready for what we're going to do right now. And he said, Drew, I've only been at this for a few weeks, but he goes, I've looked everywhere and it seems like HOGS is like the place. And I'm like, you know what? Thank you. I appreciate that. And he goes, by the way, you know, he goes, make sure Heather knows that I appreciated the other day when she got back to me immediately. And I said, well, we try. And I go, and I'm on Heather's ass if she drags the day talking to somebody because I don't want it to drag out a day. And he says, well, she gets kudos for that. And I Zoomed with another young man a couple days ago, and he wanted to talk about Brian. He's like, hey, make sure you tell Brian I said thanks for all he does. And man, you know, and he had a bunch of nice words for Brian, and I relayed that to him. And that's the HOGS experience, you know. I started 10 years ago by myself, and now we have everybody. We have this big freaking team that keeps growing. And it's all about you, and it's here for you, and it's taking care of you. It's taking care of the customers. When I was in that first job where I was at, it's launched my career. In that 5 years I was at that company, I got my turbine time, I got Enstrom time, I got Schweitzer 300 times. That job launched my career. But, you know, for those of you like moving across the country or going somewhere and taking a chance on your career, I got in a car and I drove 4.5 hours away. I loaded up my car and I didn't know anybody in the big city I was going to. I'm from small town Indiana. I didn't know a soul in that town. And I loaded up, I had a Corvette at the time. I loaded up my Corvette, jammed full of my stuff, and I drove and showed up at 8 a.m. on Monday. And they were like, wow, you come from Indiana this morning? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, wow. And I showed up and they're like, where are you staying tonight? And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't even know where I was going to stay. But I took the job and I drove there. And luckily, before the end of the day, the old timer I was flying with says, hey, I know somebody that you can rent their basement for $25 a night. I'm like, I'm in. So I started renting a basement for $25 a night, showed up for work every day, and pretty soon my boy Jeff Kaza, who's one of my superstars, private commercial CFI, now Columbus PD, I ended up renting a room from Jeff, one of my students. And I could bore you with that story, another great story, another superstar. And that's where it all started. And I don't know, what am I telling you? I don't know. That launched my career, but I had to get in the car and drive 4.5 hours, and I didn't know a soul. I didn't even know where I was going to sleep that night. I had no idea, and I didn't have any money. I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I freaking did it. I don't know how I did it. So, that's my story. Reach out to us if you need anything. Heather, we're going to start building some of this stuff through Heather. I said the other day, hey, with all these packages and everything we got going on, I love talking to everybody, and I've talked to a lot of you. But I'm going to have Heather kind of start building some of this, and she can send you to Brian or to me. And so just reach out to Heather, 574-767-1797. Just because I've gotten a little overwhelmed here in the recent couple weeks, trying to take care of everybody and then do everything else that I got to do around here, which I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that's why we have a staff. And 10 years later, here we are. So, and we're in the final stages. I guess I'll announce this. I think it's a done deal. Any minute they're going to walk through the door with the papers. Tonight they're going to the aviation board meeting to sign off as the new HOGS hangar. It's been a stressful couple weeks trying to make that happen. And the way the airport works, it's a land lease, but we've entered a purchase agreement. The hangar, when the paperwork's done, I'm the owner of the HOGS hangar. Been leasing for 3 years, and a couple weeks ago they got an offer, and in the middle of everything, my heart sunk, and I'm like, oh my God, this is my home, this is my everything. If I can't get this loan and compete to get this place purchased, I'm screwed. I got to move HOGS now. Where would I go? What would I do? They said, oh, there's some other places here, but they may not have a bathroom, they may not have heat. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to go back in time. So the good news is, I've jumped through the hoops. I've worked with the bank, I've worked with the airport. I was down to see the airport manager a little bit ago. They're going to the aviation board tonight to get them to sign off on the new lease for HOGS taking over the ground, and got the loan all set up. Sure, I probably shouldn't say because I'll jinx it now, but I think we're good to go. So HOGS, this has been our home for 3 years. Now, instead of just leasing, we're owning. So we'll be here for you. Okay, I need a drink. I hope Heather and everybody took care of you all. We were live. We are live, but this is the start of Live Training Tuesday. And I think, I wanted to kind of show Nick, hey, this is all you got to do on a weekly basis. We don't have to have fancy lights and productions and multiple cameras and all, because you know what? Really what people usually need, we usually can straighten you out. And Brian, if you're still here, Brian can testify to this. Somebody will get on Zoom with us and they'll be like, oh my God, and they're so worried and they're all tore up over something. And then usually it just takes a little 5 or 10 minutes of going, well, hey, you know what? You should try this and maybe you should do that. And then people immediately go, oh, wow. We take that mountain. It was a mountain and then it turns into a molehill after we talk to you a little bit and help you figure out what it is your struggle is. We do it all the time. So just to prove we're live, Nick says, my wife says, only 4.5 hours. That would be nice. Yeah, hey, yeah, I only had 4.5 hours. You got 18. Yeah, I understand. You got a bigger little commitment than I did. I just wanted to share in my pain of, not pain, that launched my career, but I didn't know that at the time. So I'm going to get me something to refresh and figure out what's next. Thanks for tuning in. See you next Tuesday at 2 for live training at 2 in 2022. Peace out.